Hey people, it's me, and this is the first video on the channel that isn't a re-upload of a terrible video I made when I was like 13, or a lightly edited one-take review, so this is a semi-introduction to you guys, I guess. And I just thought, what better way to set the precedent for what kind of movies I like, whilst also having any chance of beating the algorithm than to talk about my personal best movies from last year. From what I've seen, 2019 was a fairly remarkable year for film, and I've still yet to watch, let's see here, boom, 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 quite a lot of movies, basically. I'll make a proper one of these once I'm fully caught up, but just for right now, it might be interesting to maybe see how my opinions change as I see other stuff, and besides, it will probably take me a further 2 years or so to catch up on this many movies, so what are you gonna do? This is a combination of both my objective and subjective takeaways from what I've seen, so the numerical ratings for the movies mentioned aren't always gonna match up, it's just how it is. And I will try to keep these free of major spoilers generally, but I also maintain the realistic obligation to go into slightly further detail with the most popular entries on the list. Very quickly, for my honourable mentions, Guy Ritchie's The Gentleman was a good, if forgettable and at times overbearingly complicated crime caper that I did quite enjoy. Pixar's Toy Story 4 was a heartfelt and colourful mini-adventure that did just about enough to justify its own existence, despite easily being the weakest in its series, also featuring an ending I'm still in two minds about. And lastly, Taika Waititi's Jojo Rabbit was a nuanced and quirkily endearing comedy that really surprised me with its emotional story beats and subversive humour that never became self-indulgent or made light of the tragedies of the Second World War. And now kicking off with my number 10 favourite movie of 2019, which was Spider-Man Far From Home. I'm wanting to say this sits alongside Thor Ragnarok and maybe Captain America the Winter Soldier as one of the best standalone Marvel movies the MCU has pumped out so far. The interplay between Peter and MJ felt so awkward and hopeless, which is great. Jake Gyllenhaal made Mysterio a household name. This energy is exactly what the MCU needs now that Thanos is gone. His trippy hallucination scenes were the visual highlight of this movie, though I wish they'd hold off a bit on us seeing Tony Stark in any form. Tony himself sort of links into my biggest problem with this movie actually. As well documented, so much of this plot revolves around him, making it feel as if Peter serves to only live in his shadow. I also feel like Tony is just B-Tech Uncle Ben, which is incredibly aggravating. Sony, you know you could have just used Uncle Ben, right? You know Sam Raimi doesn't own those characters, right? My biggest problem with Spider-Man's entire inclusion in the MCU though is the light-hearted tone it's going for. I'm not saying that every main character needs to die right now, I just feel like there are basically no consequences to anything happening on screen, you know? Peter juggling his double lives is hard for him, but it's only hard for him because we're just told it is. MJ doesn't get mad when he abandons her at the theatre, no one notices him fucking incapacitate Flash Gordon. All dramatic tension is repeatedly undercut for gags that often aren't earned or even clever. And don't get me started on Peter revealing his identity being treated as a joke. What the admittedly with one obvious exception, but that exception doesn't make up for the rest. Okay, I've just realised how negative I sound right now. It was really funny the whole way through, it has the best mid-credit scene in any Marvel movie, and it's a lot of fun overall, so watch this movie. Number 9, John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum. This is definitely John Wick feeling his most generic yet. The world building continues, but it feels it's lost its focused grit in favour of globetrotting and varying colour palettes. This is also the first time the franchise tries to be intentionally funny, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. First, Star Wars decided it was going to be Marvel, but not you two, John Wick. Not you two.
Oh, they fly now! They fly now!
My only other real complaint with John Wick 3 is the fact that its opening sequence is easily the best part of it, so the rest of it suffers as a result of this, but despite that, John Wick 3 is my favourite franchise entry so far. There are far more elaborate set pieces, far more interesting side characters, far longer and more concentrated action scenes with lengthier and wider takes. Almost like a video game, it constantly introduces new mechanics in combat, has unique premises and settings for fight scenes, and then the story really starts to hot up as well. It may be a tried and tested formula, but I'm never going to turn my nose down to even more long takes of fantastic stunt work and choreography with an ever-rising sense of scale in the plot. Apart from some pacing issues with a final fight going on for quite a while, this is riveting. Keanu Reeves, I salute you. Number 8 of my favourite movies of 2019 is Avengers Endgame. Don't worry, there aren't any more Marvel movies on this list, unsurprisingly, but this movie actually does mean a lot to me. The first time seeing this was by far the best time I've spent in the cinema in my entire life. Waiting that year between Infinity War and Endgame gave me a lot of time to fantasize about what would be included in this movie, and it didn't disappoint me in the slightest. I remember missing a bus on the way there, getting into town after my friends had already taken their seats, skipping on getting a snack, sitting down, making our last bets, and then completely being drawn in with that first scene. Endgame is definitely not a 10 out of 10 movie. It isn't at all rewatchable, its humour is some of the worst in the MCU, and a few aspects of it are played quite safe, but watching it for the first time was a 10 out of 10 experience. The Russos nailed the scope and emotional poignance befitting of this franchise's final outing, with a number of creative decisions that were truly unforeseeable in the best way. The portal scene scene, Cap and Peggy's dance, Tony seeing Peter again, and my personal favourite, Cap lifting Mjolnir are all moments that will live on in my memory, and it's very powerful that movies today are still able to create original iconography. It's taken me a while to come to terms with the fact that this is a movie designed predominantly for the initial viewing, but now I'm okay with it. All things considered, Avengers Endgame is an effective and satisfying conclusion to the Infinity Saga, despite a few shortcomings. Now on to number 7, which is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I watched this the first time and thought, wow, that was really well made, but literally amounted to nothing. What was even the point of that? You're a stupid ass guy, Tarantino. You fucking prick. But after watching most of it over again and seeing some video essays on it, it turns out I was the stupid idiot bin man, because Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is great. It does not have that many jaw-dropping moments. It is quite slow. It takes a lot to get into, but it is an involving and infallibly honest watch once you settle in. There is a sense of camaraderie and bromance between Rick and Cliff that I just fucking love. I fucking love it. I could sit there and listen to them talk about whatever the hell for so long. Rick's story of redemption is about as heartfelt as Tarantino does. The exploration of Cliff's morals and backstory is such a rewarding journey, and while Sharon Tate's side story is the least interesting, it adds a great deal to that final scene. I don't see straight 40-something white guys ever shutting up about this movie for the next 20 years. Oh, and by the way, that third act. And number 6, 1917. Roger Deakins, my boy, you have got it. Not often I use this word, but talking purely visually, this movie is a masterpiece. The transitions are, for the most part, very well hidden. The logistics of how they managed to do things like lifting the camera over that river, or gliding it down from the inside of the top floor of that sniper's tower to the ground, out of a window, sounds horrific, but it is absolutely worth it. This is easily in the top 3 best looking movies of the year, but apart from the shot composition, it's also worth noting the remarkable lighting and blocking that give this movie the dramatic weight it requires. Apart from the final half hour of Endgame, nothing emotionally affected me as much as 1917 this year. I mean it, I and the friend I saw it with sat there crying without talking to each other for about 5 minutes after it finished. I thought this was a 10 out of 10 on first watch as well, but another viewing made me realise that the majority of its impact is achieved through shock value, which is fine, but it doesn't sustain the bulk of its substance beyond that first watch, which is a bit of a shame. Also, the dialogue is a bit bland, just a little bit. Still brilliant on a technical level though. Opening the latter half of this list at number 5 is Joker. I saw this movie 5 times in the cinema, which is the most I've ever seen anything on the big screen. I say it because I have to, but Joaquin Phoenix is mesmerizing here. He achieves the exceedingly rare feat of acting in a way so detailed and hyper-realistic that it transcends the thought of the performance in my head, and I only see the character. Let's be real, if it weren't for Joaquin, would this film have even done that well? Probably not. Anyway, the Joker is one of my favourite characters in anything ever, and I have very particular reservations about him. Keeping his backstory ambiguous always works best for me, so the premise of a Joker origin story did put me off a lot. It speaks volumes then about how well they pulled it off that I loved this movie as much as I did. I really feel the cinematography is underrated in this movie, by the way. Like, look at this shit. And this. And this. Like, wow. Also, Hilda fucking... the woman completely deserved that Oscar. This is one of the few movie soundtracks I listen to on Spotify sometimes, sheerly due to its sorrow and power. Just for the record, I don't think this movie is particularly deep. The message of Joker feels a bit confused and pseudo-edgy in a way that isn't too distracting, but I don't feel the need to grasp any exact meaning from it. I think it works very well as a contained story of an outsider turning against the world that played a huge part in making him what he is, mainly due to the creative extended metaphor of Arthur expressing himself through his physicality. This isn't meant as an insult at all, by the way, but this is the perfect movie for an audience with an interest in films over filmmaking. Pretty much everybody I asked about it thought it was one of the best of the year, and I can't remember the last time a movie had such a unanimous response in the general public. At number 4 for 2019 is Bong Joon-ho's Parasite, a beautiful and manic ode to modern class struggles, the ugliness of desire, and so much more. Of course, it is gorgeously shot, phenomenally acted, and all the rest, but more than anything, this movie transitions not only its tone but its genre multiple times, all with such ease and triumph. I've not seen many projects play this daringly with dramatic devices before. Parasite is best experienced without knowing really anything about it, so I won't describe where it goes, but it introduces new elements at every turn and is the most unique film of the year by quite a far margin. It isn't my favourite of 2019, but it embodies the experimentality that defines modern filmmaking more than any other film of the year, so I think it was the perfect choice for Best Picture. Also, seeing Bong Joon-ho, the most lovable madman on the planet, reacting to winning 3 Oscars in a night is heartwarming stuff. Definitely Definitely the tensest and most genuinely unpredictable picture this year, with numerous subtleties and powerful metaphors, a film I can actually recommend to anyone. Also, the score is unrecognizably spectacular. At number 3, Knives Out. So as it turns out, Rian Johnson can do subversion pretty fucking well. Bombshells drop in the unlikeliest of places. Johnson is so good at fleshing out a large number of characters in a script where so much is going on, especially when it comes to characterizing people negatively, as there are quite a few characters that I really hated at some points. Daniel Craig, Ana de Armas, Dom Johnson, Chris Evans, Jamie Lee Curtis, Toni Collette, Michael fucking Shannon. Everybody is perfect. Not only is this a murder mystery so good that watching it the second time is just as fun, but it also doubles as the best comedy of the year. I mean it, this film is funnier than most comedies are these days. The use of environmental pans, slow motion, the erratic violin-infused soundtrack, and the beautifully eccentric mansion the majority of the film takes place in develops a grand tone of antique luxury. The film also differentiates itself from similar projects in its genre by featuring a modern-day time setting despite its old-fashioned locational setting, as well as being unapologetically self-referential with its central character and established crime writer. Bro, Captain America tells Hereditary Lady to eat shit, then just dips. How can you not love this fucking movie? Number 2, The Lighthouse. I initially thought this was a technically sound but pretentious and boring affair that I probably would have given a 7 out of 10. But this is a great example of how sometimes, for whatever reason, you just need to watch a movie again, because The Lighthouse is a truly magnificent experience. A testament to the fact that, in my opinion, atmosphere is the key to creating a thoroughly impactful piece of film. Every second you spend locked in this raging tempest of a movie, the elements of the world are tangible. You really are soaked in the water, frozen by the harsh winds. You actually feel it when Robert Pattinson nuts on your forehead. The tight shot composition, 1.19:1 aspect ratio, and black and white lenses create a world that feels utterly inescapable. The lighting is stunning. Willem Dafoe's eyes looked like they were piercing Robert Pattinson's soul. The editing is paramount, opting to assault your eyes with short, sharp cuts of disturbing and supernatural imagery that stays etched in your mind. I've been a horror movie purist for as long as I can remember, and this film has scenes that make me uncomfortable. The score is the best thing about it though, without a doubt. It is ominous and hateful and so deeply, deeply dark. In fact, listening to any of it really makes me want to watch the movie again, despite me seeing it 3 times in theaters. I find something about The Lighthouse to be profoundly evocative. The entire time it's trying to tell you something, but that something is buried deep in the sand. There is such a complex network of ideas and suggestions in this maelstrom of torment, but I do have a theory. Perhaps I'll talk at greater length one day about what I think the meaning of the movie is. One day. And my number 1 favorite movie of 2019 was Ari Aster's Midsommar. I actually saw this with my friend and his family in New York on my request. It's my favorite movie in quite a while, and they all hated it, so suffice it to say, this movie was quite fucking polarizing. It's currently the only movie from 2019 I have bought on Blu-ray, and it blew me away from the first time I watched it. After this, Ari Aster is my favorite director working today. How he makes movies just makes sense to me, in a way. He finds horror in the unlikeliest but most relatable of things. Stress, being in a failing relationship, feeling alienated in a group of people, and something that I don't get why we haven't seen more of in horror, drug abuse. He has such an emotive and autorial way of unnerving the viewer. None of the characters stand out that much, but that really works in the film's favour, as it minimalizes their perceived control over the events surrounding them to create a series of horror sequences that are unrelenting. From a filmmaking perspective, it's a masterclass in horror. The film is beautifully shot and blocked, well lit, tensely edited, it has an amazingly unique and isolating score, it does everything it sets out to do so well. Hereditary slithers up your spine by never showing its full hand and keeping most of its disturbing content hidden in the shadows, so Midsommar instead casts these deep-rootedly wounding concepts into the spotlight in an offensive cleansing of the palate that truly disgusts and disorients. Beyond this though, I feel Midsommar ultimately has a lot to say about the human experience, furthermore exploring the way we value emotions and the relationships between them in the human psyche. This work would not function as it does if it weren't for Florence Pugh's brutally vulnerable performance, because a lot of the scenes that hit different in terms of distinct emotional impact are those of Dani reacting to the things around her. The part where she's on shrooms is a sensory shipwreck in the best way possible, and other moments that I won't spoil have a way of tapping into this bizarre zone where time seems to stand still and the things you're shown are morbidly transfixing in a way I haven't seen in anything else before. A main critique of this movie is how weak its story is, but I feel the main substance of it isn't in the surface level story of some college students visiting a pagan cult in Sweden, but in the emotional arc Dani engages in throughout. want. While the moments of hypnotizing dread totally enthrall me whilst I watch them, the puzzle pieces of Danny's slow journey to emancipation scattered amongst the horrors form an uncomfortable group of ideas. Are you a bad person for not ending a relationship you know is going downhill? Does powering through the awkwardness of group grieving give you a more emotionally enriching experience? The notion that human familiarity is merely a facade to placate each other with, and the only way to become truly close to someone is by embracing the natural world around you and hiding nothing about who you are. This film's exploration of humanity is one of the most fundamentally disturbing concepts I've ever seen put to film, and it has really stuck with me. It shies away from nothing, goes to hell, pulling you with it, and is one of the few movies that I can say properly fucked me up. And it is my favourite film of 2019. What are your opinions on the movies of 2019? Let me know in the comments below. What's your most anticipated movie coming up? And why is it The Batman? God, what a fucking teaser that was. Feel free to follow me on Twitter and Letterboxd. Please hit like if you did enjoy. I just wasted my entire trust fund on a computer so I can make videos, so I might need it. I hope you're doing well at this time, and I will catch you all in the next one. Bye.